There are people that are prospering because Satan wishes that they do. There are people that are not prospering because Satan doesn't desire for them to prosper. But I'm amazed at how many people say things like, if God wanted me to have it, he'd give it to me. But yet Satan just very clearly said, everything in this world, I have power over it. And I'll only give it to the ones I want to give it to. So the only way to overcome that is to be a believer. Because then Satan can't stop what God's doing.
Welcome to Stone Point Community Church, where your life is made better. Thank you for listening to our podcast, and thanks for supporting the ministry. If you enjoyed today's message, why don't you be a blessing and share it with a friend? We appreciate you and pray for God's very best in your life.
Let's turn to Psalms 27:11. This is where we have been, I believe. We started on this road last Wednesday. And it says, teach me thy way, O Lord, and lead me in a plain path because of mine enemies. If you have a Bible with a footnote on it, you will see there's typically a footnote that says, because of my enemies who observe me. Meaning that your enemies are always watching you, and they are taking notes. They are retrieving data, and they are determining what are your weaknesses, what are your strengths, what are the things that will get you derailed, what is the purpose and the plan and the attack, because he knows, Satan is very clear that if he showed up with a pitchfork and horns, you would respond differently than if he shows up as what you desire. Are you following me? Amen. And so there are demons and minions of Satan that are purely there for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to observe what it is that you are doing. And so David's response to understanding this principle was to say, Lord, teach me the way. Teach me the plain way. In other words, the obvious way that is the correct way. Teach me that way so that I can behave myself in a way that keeps my enemies from getting the advantage. And when you begin to understand that there is so much in the attack that comes into your life, I think one of the things that people struggle with is understanding that the attack that comes into your life has to be idiosyncratic to you. So, for example, if you are a person who struggles, let's just say in certain areas that other people don't struggle in, you understand the attack that comes against you has to be different. If you've gotten a victory, let's say over alcohol, then alcohol has no appeal to you. I don't care what you package it in. I don't care what circumstances you create. It just doesn't have any appeal. So then Satan has to find a new in for you. If your children are your Achilles heel, if your children will stop you from serving, if your children will stop you from attending, if your children will stop you from giving and stop you from serving God, then his avenue will always be through your children. So the thing that he's looking to do is to determine and to define your idols. And a lot of people don't realize that they think they worship God and God only. And if you notice, the Bible says not just God, but God only. Jesus' response to temptation was, him only will I serve. So then what does that mean? That means that there is a possibility to serve other idols. And if you are going to serve other idols, then God needs to display himself to you in a way that you begin to discern which one's him and which one is others. Are you following? So we've been talking about mammon. And mammon, it moves people's decisions and they don't see it. Most of the time, when people are struggling with the spirit of mammon, they typically don't know it. because mammon presents itself as an idol. And it's usually presented as your idol, not as the idol. So in other words, if it was the idol, then it would present itself in any way it could, and it would take the chance that you would ignore it, reject it, or run from it. But when it understands what pushes your buttons, when it understands what motivates you, when it understands what drives you, it will adapt itself to present itself to you in a way that you don't recognize the influence until your decisions have been made. Are you following me? And so the leadership of the Holy Ghost becomes so important, because now, as he's saying, teach me your ways, he's saying that the accuracy of the attacks that can come into your life. Listen, some of you have gone through things that it's tailor-made. It's almost like Satan went into the war room and said, okay, bring up this person. What is their weakness? What are they going to fall for? How do I bring people into their life? You ever, if you really pay attention, honor is the currency of heaven. Okay? Honor is the currency of heaven. And what you honor, you are never offended with. Okay? And so when you have honor, that's a currency of heaven. Faith is a currency of heaven. In other words, you can't get anything out of God without having faith. It's one of his currencies. Revelation is a currency. You can't get anything from God without a revelation. Are you understanding what I'm saying? Okay. So the reason why I'm saying all of that is because the last one I want to mention to you is relationships is also a currency. And when God wanted to bless the people, he brought a God-filled man to be a blessing to them. When God, and I don't mean man as in gender, I mean man as in a person who is God-filled. That's why you have a shepherd. There's a supply that God brings through a shepherd to bless you. Likewise, when Satan wants to destroy you, he will bring a person to do it. Hence the reason why relationships are currency. Are you with me? And so a lot of times people don't understand that your greatest attack doesn't come but by people who should not be around you. And when we look at how we behave and how we act, he said, show me in a plain way how to behave myself in front of all the people who are watching. Because the way that they're watching, they're taking notes of me, and they're making sure to understand what is my weakness, what is my Achilles heel, what is the place where I can falter, because the presentation comes in that particular way. And so we started there, and then we started going through the understanding where Jesus said, take on my yoke. He said, and learn of me. In other words, the way that the things in the kingdom of God work are not the same as the way they work in the world. And he said, one of the things you have to do if you want an easy yoke and an easy burden, you're going to have to learn the way he does it. Everyone is indoctrinated immediately into the way the world does things. When people say things, for example, like maybe they're struggling in their sexuality or something like that, and they'll say, God made me this way. And if God made me this way, then he is fine with me being this way. Well, there's a couple of challenges with that. David said, in iniquity was I born. Amen. So everybody is born with certain struggles. We have the sin nature. I'm not talking about the act of sin. I'm talking about the nature of sin. Yeah. How many of you who have children have your kids have ever lied to you and you taught them how to do it? So in our nature is the sin nature, which means that there are various things that people have. And as crazy as it sounds, some people are born with a predilection to alcohol. Some people are born with a predilection of confusion in terms of sexuality. Some people are born with an attraction to the wrong underage, overage, all kinds of things. People are people. And so it is not that people are not born with challenges. It's you're not supposed to stay that way. There's a place where God expects you to overcome. When you are born again, you are given a new nature. Are you following what I'm saying? And so you are automatically indoctrinated into the wrong way of doing things. That's the problem that every believer has to overcome, no matter what it may be. And so when you are indoctrinated into a certain lifestyle or a belief system, then God comes along and says, I need you to behave differently. Because these enemies who are observing you, they know what your weaknesses are. They've been watching you. They know that there's things that have been passed down from one generation to the next. Not necessarily generational curses, but generational habits. Are you following me? And so there's information that's been gathered and recon that's been done sometimes long before you even were clear about what was going on. Some of you, really, if you think back or even ask when it comes to your parents, you were probably almost aborted. And I don't mean like an abortion. I just mean killed or not made it into this world. Because Satan knew from the very beginning that there was a potential that you'd give him hell. I mean, you have to understand that. And so a lot of times what Satan will try to do is take you out before you know better. Because once you get a clue, it's over. Or let me say it to you this way. Once you get a revelation, and that revelation leads you to faith, and that faith also corresponds with God putting the right people in your life, then you have enough currency. It's the strategy. It's a plan. It's not random. So when Jesus said, take my yoke, and he says, my yoke, and he says, learn of me. Or in other words, let me teach you a different way. Because you already have a yoke on you. And that yoke is not my yoke. That's the one you've learned to cooperate with. So when David came to Saul and he said, I'll fight Goliath. And he said, because Goliath comes to me with a sword. He said, but I'm going to him in the name of the Lord. And he said, and I know that I fought a lion and I fought a bear. He said, and this uncircumcised Philistine. When he said uncircumcised Philistine, he was saying not in the sense of just circumcision that we know naturally being circumcised. That has nothing to do. Circumcision was in fact a sign of covenant. So what he's saying is, when we go to battle, I'm not going against him with a sword and a spear. He said, I'm going against him with a covenant. And he said, as long as I'm in covenant with God, then he's not fighting with me. He's fighting with God. So then Saul says, which, you have to understand types and shadows from the Old Testament to the New. That's one of the problems. If you've never taken a Old Testament covenant type class, you'll never understand all the types and shadows. Saul represented man and sin nature. Saul represented human sensuality because Saul tried to load David up with his armor. He said, here, you're going to need my armor. You're going to need my helmet. You're going to need all these things. And now you can almost see David as a boy wearing all this heavy stuff that everyone else says this is how we go to war. But the problem is David is carrying all of this chainmail and armor trying to fight a battle that he was already equipped for before Saul, human spirit, got involved. The same spirit that got Adam and Eve to cover themselves up with fig leaves to try to resolve their own issues instead of recognizing the one who has created them and who has called them. So as David shows up to Saul, and Saul says, here, let me give you armor. Let me give you a bazooka. Let me give you this. Let me give you all the stuff you're going to need to beat Goliath. David is like, I can't fight in this. I haven't tested this. I tell you what I've been tested in, this slingshot. And so I'm going to go get me 5 stones, because Goliath had 4 brothers. And I got this slingshot. And I'm going to use what I have, because if God be for me, then when I release that rock, I don't care which way the rock goes, God will grab it and throw it in the right direction and hit the target every single time. Because my life is not hid in Satan, my life is hid in God. And if I trust him, then he will always show up in every situation. So you don't come to me with your sword and your spear, because if you do, I come to you in the name of God. I come to you as a member of the army of the Lord. I come to you as a covenant child. I have a promise, you do not. So then I have to learn how to reject certain ways. That's why he said, come learn of me. In other words, all that you learned, forget it. Quit messing with the stuff that don't work. Because if you learn from me, my yoke gets easy and my burden fits. Because that's what people think when they think light, they think you don't have to do anything. That's not what he's saying. He's saying my yoke fits. You ever wear some ill-fitting clothes? And you're like, it just doesn't do it. And you can feel it all day long. And the funny part about it is you think everybody else can see it. So you're self-conscious of it because it doesn't fit. And so now you are troubled all day because you're wearing the wrong fit. And Jesus says, come learn of me and I'll give you the right fit. And I'll teach you how to work with me. And then this is where we left off last week, Philippians 1:27. In the message, please. Philippians 1:27 in the message. Meanwhile, live in such a way that you are a credit to the message of Christ. Let nothing in your conduct hang on whether I come or not. Your conduct must be the same whether I show up to see things for myself or I hear of it from a distance. Stand united, singular in vision, contending for people's trust in the message and the good news. Notice what he says, not or in the slightest before the opposition. Your courage and unity will show them what they're up against. Defeat for them, and both because of now when David shows up for the battle, and the Bible says he ran to the battle, his unflinching showed not that he was skilled. Notice what it says, defeat for them and victory for you. Both of them are from. This is why it's so important for you to understand. Flinching is a quick nervous movement as an instinctive reaction or the reaction you've learned. That's what instinct is. Instinct is what you've learned. Right? If you find a baby, typically a baby's not afraid of a snake. That's why when you deal with your kids, you teach them what to be aware of and what to not do. Kids aren't afraid of dogs. They'll run right on it. Pull their hair, tail, and everything else. And if you got a well-mannered dog, you don't have to worry about it. But if you got one that's a little touchy, it could be a serious problem. Right? So you teach your kids what to be concerned about and what to not be and have respect for. Not fear, but respect. Are you following me? So then whatever's instinctive to you, you've learned it. And that's why he says, don't respond or flinch out of your instinct. Stand strong out of your faith. We are always faced with circumstances in our lives where you're going to have to make a decision. You're always faced with objectives or what's the word I'm looking for? Opposition. That's the word. You're always going to be faced with opposition that you're going to have to stand before. And the moment you stand before that opposition, you have a choice as to how you're going to respond. You are either going to flinch out of your instincts or you are going to respond out of your faith. He said, if you stand strong and respond out of your faith, it becomes a token to them that they're not going to make it. And it becomes a token to you that you have the victory. And so most people, when they're faced with a problem or a situation where they've got a decision point, they will flow out of their instinct because instinct feels natural. It feels normal, but it's not out of their faith. And the moment they don't respond out of their faith, Satan is letting you know you lost. And it's telling him that he won. And this is why he said, you have to understand, let's see, both because of God, there's far more to this life than trusting in Christ. There is also suffering for him. And the suffering is as much a gift as you're involved in the same kind of struggle you saw me go through, and on which you are now getting an updated report in this letter. See, a lot of times people don't understand. He expects you to deny yourself. He expects you to make that choice in the moment. Because most of the time, you got a fraction of a second to make a decision. You have a fraction of a second to stand in your faith. When faced with opposition, faced with temptation, faced with a trial, you have a fraction of a second to make the decision, I am not going to flinch. And the more immature you are in the things of God, the faster it is for you to flinch. And this is why it becomes so important to learn of him. But people think all I have to do is learn a spell as if it's an incantation. It's not a spell. It's not an incantation. I don't care how much of the words you read, if you don't understand it or get it, if you are not seeking after the things of God, if you are not after it for the revelation and for the understanding that you need to have, you can parakeet. Polly does not know what a cracker is. Polly just knows that if he makes a certain level of sounds and syllables and things like that, you will respond with a type of treat. And Polly will never push the cracker back or something else and say, no, I asked for a cracker. Why are you giving me these sunflower seeds? I don't want this. I asked you specifically for a cracker. Polly could care less what you hand him. And so many people, from believing standpoint, parakeet God, thinking that you can parakeet what God says and not realizing until you have a full revelation that the whole host of heaven is behind you and that you are able to stand and not flinch when the attack comes, not bow when the enemy steps in, not cower when all hell is broken loose. When you are able to stand and then stand some more and know that God has got your back, that he has never left you, he has never forsaken you, he will never give up on you, knowing that you have the victory, only then are you able to say that this is a token to your destruction and it's a sign that I have the victory. And it becomes the defining moment between those who know how to demonstrate their faith and those who think it's a game. Because Satan's not playing. I'm amazed at how many part-time Christians don't realize they're fighting a full-time devil. Can I tell you something? Seriously. Seriously. This has nothing to do with the message, but it illustrates a point, so I'm going to share it with you, okay? "2008 was one of the worst financial crises that ever hit this country. And it had global impacts, but this country was decimated. Real estate market was decimated. I lost it all, everything. All I had left was a car. I went from owning 2 businesses to a 5,000 square foot home on a golf course to all I had was a car. I knew it was coming. I saw it was coming. I knew what it was going to do, but I couldn't move fast enough to get there. Because by the time I knew what was really happening and how to respond to it, I was a day late and a dollar short. And I made a decision. And that decision was 2 years ago. That's why we started the events that we do, specifically for business people. Because I vowed within myself that if I had the power to save somebody from going through what I went through, that I would do it. And we are coming up on a very catastrophic situation. It'll be here within 6 months to a year. And my point is this. I had to learn how to respond to that. It wasn't the correct response the first time, but God showed me things on how to weather and to be in position and to do the things that were needed to make sure that we made it. The pain I felt losing it all, I would not wish on anybody. Nobody. I just would not wish it on anyone. But I also know that in that situation, it taught me things that I probably could have learned an easier way. See, when you realize, and the whole point of it was to take me out. The whole point of it was to stop what you see right now. And if I was to be honest with you, it almost did. People have no idea what Satan is trying to do because you have no idea what God is going to do. You just have no clue. And the thing that becomes so important is that as we face trials, as we face situations, understanding you have to learn a different way. Because it's a hard issue that most people struggle with. So I'll look at Luke. Let's go to Let's go to 2 Peter. No, let's go to 2 Corinthians 4:4. The Passion Translation, please. Second Corinthians 4:4. You ready? For their minds have been what? By leaving them in there keeps them from the wonderful news. Who was the? So then blindness or your inability to see something has very little to do with your ojos, your eyes, and everything to do with your understanding. And I'm amazed at how many people think things like, well, if God wanted me to have it, he'd get it to me. Or they think things like, whatever got to me, God brought it. That's eyesight without insight. Everything that happens is not God. And everything that doesn't happen is not the will of God. If that was the case, then anyone who ends up in hell would have to be God's desire, which the Bible clearly states it's not. But people gauge their faith and their belief from their experiences in life. What have I been through? What is the struggles? How did I respond normally? How did I do this? And they look at things and become blinded, not because they can't see it, but typically because they're looking at something else. The whole nature, one of the things when I was a kid, I loved magic. And I loved to learn magic tricks. And one of the things you learn very early on, that magic is sleight of hand. There's no way that magic is real. It's all sleight of hand. It's all diversion. It's all deception. Really. And so for me to get you focused on something else while I'm doing something over here is the very essence of magic. Satan loves nothing more. The God of, notice that's little g. Leaving them in, and he says their blindness keeps them. You have to know that concerning what you believe, there could be blindness. And if you are blind to what God is saying to you, then when Jesus comes along and says, learn of me, that means you automatically have to know there's more for you. Because there's things that you could learn that would begin to open your eyes to see what needs to be seen. I'll pick on myself because I think that it's easier and y'all are nicer when I do that. One of the struggles that I've always faced is knowing what God wants me to do and trying to figure out how can I do it without money. I'm serious. Because the body of Christ is so critical about money. And so it's like, okay, Lord, I know what you told me, but where's it coming from? You're going to bring a dog with a barrel around his neck with $100 bills in it? You're going to miraculously drop money out the sky? What are you going to do? Because you know that what you're asking for, there's a cost associated with that. But your people hate money. They hate it. They want it, but they hate it. They have such a disastrous relationship with money. They desire stuff but hate money. And they hate anyone who has it. Or who they think has it. I was watching this video. I forget who sent it to me, but it was a video of a lady who she's in the church and she's on a church stage, and it's a secular song or beat, but she's rapping over the beat about God. And you could tell she's past her years of having a rap career. She really is. But the thing about it is it's always the comments. It's never the video. It's always the comments, right? So, first thing you do after you watch the video, you're like, oh, whatever. You go to, and the comments be doing way too much. But, it's amazing to me how many people make comments about her saying they're just trying to get that new money. They're trying to get the young people's money. No one said that maybe they're struggling trying to figure out how to reach a generation that they're not sure how to reach. That was never a comment. And I read them all. It was like 200-something comments. I literally went through them all. Because I just wanted to see. I'm one of those kind of, I'm an inquisitive type person. And I'm like, nobody said that these people, whatever church it was, wherever in the world it is, that they're trying to do whatever they can to reach a broken generation. It was all, well, they're trying to get money, they're trying to do it. You know what, my point I'm getting at is, that's a heart issue. That is an absolute heart issue. And it's blinding to people who, if you ask them, they'll say it's not. But in reality, it is. And if you're ever going to prosper in the things of God, you cannot be going in with a heart issue. Because the moment you face an attack, you're going to flinch. You're going to respond out of your heart and not out of your revelation. And that's when Satan knows, they're playing church. They're not real. They're not about it. If you told me that if I could get some young folks saved, that I had to rap over a secular beat and make up a rap, I'll do it in a heartbeat. If I thought that would get some young folks saved and snatch them from the grips of hell, I would do whatever it took. But you understand, that's the byproduct of not being blind. And people want prosperity. They really do. They want it. But this is where, for me, when I was telling you about how I lost it all, you could be smarter than me, but you won't outwork me. You could be gifted, you got more money than me, but you'll never outwork me. And that's how I learned how to come through situations like what happened in 2008. And even to this day, today, you will not outwork me. While everybody sleep, there are times I'm up all night long. Not toiling, working. Because if you don't put your hand to the plow, you'll have nothing. But then everybody wants something, but they want it the fast way, the ski mask way. And they don't realize there's no way to do it that way and have God let you keep it. It's blindness. And so when you begin to understand what you're up against, then it's the one who's the most diligent that comes out on top. It's the one who's the most faithful that'll come out on top. It's the one who's learned not to flinch that'll come out. 2 Peter 1:8. An easy read. Second Peter 1:8. And the thing that always concerns me is how a one-talent person is always trying to tell a five-talent person how to do it. Moody, the great evangelist, which is the progenitor of the Moody Institute, D.L. Moody said it this way. He said, I like my way of evangelizing better than your way of not doing it. It's always one-talent people that want to tell you how to do something that five-talent people are already doing. And it's a shame, because the truth of the matter is, if they knew how to be a five-talent person, they'd be too busy doing what they need to do than to be sitting around criticizing. Look at what it says in the easy read. If all these things are in you and growing, if all these things are where? And you will never to be. You will produce the kind of fruit that should come from. What kind of fruit should you produce? The kind that comes from where? So then what you know When he says, come learn of me. When David says, teach me. What you know is what you're going to produce. And he says the challenge is you're not producing that kind that comes from the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. But those who don't grow in these what? It's up there, right? The ones that don't grow in are, they cannot see clearly what they have. They have forgotten that they were cleansed from their past. He said people who don't grow in these blessings, they're blind. They can't, that's why they don't walk in it. And so in order to justify their own inadequacies, they have to now say your intentions are ill. You got to be doing something wrong. It's funny, I was talking to, we were actually talking to Reverend Ricky a while ago, and he said, you'd be surprised what people said we do. Now, they own half the town. I mean, that's not a secret, right? The name of it should be called Edwardsville, because they own half of it. They own the hotel. There's only one. Actually, there's two, and they own both of them. Let me correct my statement. So they own the concrete plant in town. There's a subway there. They own the building the subway's in. I mean, they own. But people say things like, well, I wonder what kind of drugs they're selling. They own half the town. So it's funny how people's hearts are a certain way because they're not willing to do the work. And because we know them personally, we have been there personally, we run with them personally, you will never outwork them. And he's old enough to be my dad. And we are tired. When we go hang out with them, we need a vacation. We're like, dear God, they are stuck on go. But I'm often amazed at how the hearts of people, I'm telling you this for a reason. Because if you want to go beyond what you have and where you are, you've got to deal with your heart. Because your heart what makes you flinch. Your heart, when you see stuff, that's what makes you respond the way you do. And before you can catch it, you've already responded. And then you respond a certain way, and you're like, now you've judged it. And then you can never have what you judged. Because it would make you a hypocrite. Is this okay? And so when he says that you cannot see clearly what they have, he says they have forgotten that they were cleansed. Why would you need to be cleansed? Because you need a new heart. That's why God said through the born-again experience, he said, I'll take out your heart of stone, and I'll give you one of flesh. He said, I'll give you one that is moldable, so that I can shape it so you think correctly. So that you stop flinching every time something happens. And people have no idea the signals they send. Remember I told you the story about how Dad was talking about how when he would fill up a rental car, and they say, put premium gas in it, he put the cheapest gas he could find. He's like, it ain't my car. You're flinching. That's a tell. Satan's going, oh, okay, well, they don't value nothing that don't belong to them because they don't think I have the ability to supply what they need. Or they respond to things that happen in such a negative way. Oh, that's the problem. That one right there will irritate them, so I'll just slow that up. They've been waiting on a house. They've been waiting on a husband. They've been waiting on a wife, and that irritates them. They get so angry about it and frustrated over it. That flusters them. Oh, that's what, I'll hinder that. So your future wife is actually on her way to church, and Satan calls her to have a blowout. She never makes it. Because he knows that's really going to mess you up. And if I hold you long enough, you'll go back to the club to find her. And she was never there in the first place. Because right picks don't happen in wrong places. Y'all got to hear me. That's how he works. This is his plan. You flinched. You telegraphed your move. This is why in boxing, Mike's an ex-boxer, this is why in boxing you feint a punch. You're telegraphing your move to see if they'll flinch and respond. Because if the right one don't get you, then the left one will. And you don't understand from a pugilistic standpoint, from a boxing standpoint, you are in the ring with an adversary who's been boxing way longer than you. His record is way better than yours, and he is trying to get you into a situation by baiting you with the very notes that he has taken, and he's observed you and used his observations and his recon against you because you're playing with someone who plays chess and you're trying to play checkers. And if you're not aware, that's why he said, be sober and vigilant. In other words, don't be drunk with your own lust. Don't be drunk with your own passions. Don't be drunk with your own. And be vigilant. In other words, keep your eyes open. It's so amazing to me how many people are walking around asleep, getting beat, just getting beat up. Ain't no more woke than the man on the moon. Just not. And then wondering why. And why. And why. And it's like, yeah, you haven't learned. Because if you learn of him, he'll open it up. He'll learn. Listen, when God told Abraham, he said, now that we've gotten the strife out of your life, he said, look and tell me what you see. He said, everything you see, he said, I'll give it to you. Do you have any idea the problem that most people have is they can't see it? If they could see it, they could have it. If you can't see yourself prosperous, you'll never have it. If you can't see where you're going, you'll never get there. How do you remember, what is the Cheshire Cat? What? Alice in Wonderland. She shows up at the fork in the road. She asked the Cheshire Cat, which way do I go? He said, where are you going? She said, I don't know. He said, then it doesn't matter which one you pick. See, if you don't have the grit, the gumption, and the direction to know where you're going, you'll flinch at everything. And then you'll wonder. Look at Luke 2:52. Luke 2:52. And did what? In and let me ask you a question. Jesus is in fact God in the flesh. Would you agree? So then how could he increase in wisdom? And more importantly, if he increased in it, why do you think you don't have to? Because I'll just, for the sake of time, I'll fast forward for you just a little bit. Why do you think it's okay to stay stuck where you are? As if you've arrived. It amazes me. It's like, remember when the Apostle Paul, God knocked him off his horse? That's where we get the term, knock people off their high horse. And so he was knocked off his horse, he fell, and he said, he acknowledged, Lord, and Jesus said, why do you kick against the prick? You understand that from that moment forward, the Apostle Paul never killed anybody again. He was a murderer, killing folks. That makes some of the stupid stuff y'all do very minuscule. But do you know how interesting it is that he never did it again? He never 6 months later says, God, look, I only killed one person today. But here's how people do. Oh, I only smoke one cigarette today. I only smoke weed recreationally on occasion. But God's working in me. No, he's not. He's trying to work in you. You working in you. And you keep flinching. Every time all hell breaks loose in your life, you turn to the bottle. You keep flinching. Every time you had a long, bad, terrible day, I just got, you want something? No, you're flinching. You're letting everybody know, all your enemies that observe you, you are letting them know that you still haven't made it. You are letting them know that you are still acting like a little baby and a little child. You are letting them know you have not arrived yet. You are letting them know this is still your weakness. And people will surround themselves with the thought, and people will say, well, at least you're trying because you're not like you used to be. The measure by which I live is not what I used to be. The measure by which I live is Christ. And when I look and point my eyes towards him, that's the measure and the standard that I live my life by. And every time you miss that mark, you have flinched and sent a signal to your enemy that says, you can't pull it off. You're not going to make it because you don't believe in your God. And all the while, God is saying, listen, I still love you. I'm going to keep working with you. We'll eventually get there. But there's a point where you've got to increase and grow. There's a point where you've got to take and say, you know what? Look at Luke 4, verse 5 in the Message. Because here's the battle cry of the lazy. God will give it to me if he wants me to have it. If I was supposed to have it, he'd have gave it to me already. Well, I submit to you, what if he already did? Watch what he says. For the second test, he led him up on and spread out all the kingdoms of the earth on display at once. Then the devil said, they're yours in all their splendor to serve your pleasure. I'm in charge of them all and can turn them over to whomever I worship me, and they're yours. The whole works. Was Satan lying? Because if he was lying, Jesus' response would have been, keep going. Jesus refused. Again, backing his refusal with Deuteronomy. Worship the Lord, your God, and if he was lying, why wouldn't Jesus say you're a liar? Why wouldn't the response just be, you know what, you're a liar, dude. So what did Satan tell him? Go back. Then the devil said, they're yours in all their to serve your. I am in charge and can turn them over to whomever. So then, there are people that are prospering because Satan wishes that they do. And there are people that are not prospering because Satan doesn't desire for them to prosper. Because he said, I'll give it to whoever I will. But I'm amazed at how many people say things like, if God wanted me to have it, he'd give it to me. But yet Satan just very clearly said, everything in this world, I have power over it. And I'll only give it to the ones I want to give it to. And I believe he gives it to people who hold it out of the economy. So the only way to overcome that is to be a believer. Because then Satan can't stop what God's doing. Which is why Jesus said, if I will only worship and him, because if I worship the Lord and him and other stuff, I'm subject to what you just told me. The only way I'm going to get it is to work with you. He said, but I'm not going to do that. Because I know you're only give it to who you will. And the truth of the matter is, you only will to give it to me if I serve you. Which I'm not going to do. And then we know what he really was telling them is, I'm going to take it from you. See, that's not flinching. This is why people don't seem to understand how Matthew 11:12 plays in to all of it. We wouldn't happen to have the Berean back there, do we? Matthew 11:12. If you don't, just put up the maybe the NLT. How about the NIV? Yeah, it's hard. The Berean says it this way, and I'll read it to you out of the Berean. It says, from the days of John the Baptist until now. What did John the Baptist come to do? To reveal Christ, right? So from the day that Christ was revealed, he says, from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven has been subject to violence, and the violent lay claim to it. Meaning that anything that's promised to you is not just going to fall out of the sky. You're going to have to go after it. And you're going to have to go after it with a desire, a faith, and revelation that is consistent with the currency you're chasing. And the moment you go after it, he says, the kingdom of heaven suffers violence, but the violent will take it by force. In other words, it's not just going to be laid out for you. And this is where people don't understand. It takes work. This is why you've got to learn of him. This is why you got to understand it's not going to fall in your lap. Just because you know a few prayers and a few words and a few scriptures, you think it's going to fall in your lap. And when it doesn't, you are upset as if it was supposed to come so quickly. Exodus 23. Exodus 23, verse 29. We'll find a place to land. He says, I will not drive them out from before thee lest the land becomes, and the beasts of the field. By little and I will drive them out from before thee, until thou be what? And? You know how many people have convinced themselves that everything they want, God should give it to them and give it to them now? And he said, I will not do that. I can't give you a mansion if you are complaining about your apartment. You're sending too many flinches. I can't give you a house on acres and you complaining about the postage stamp that your house sits on today. Do you have any idea? God said, I care more about the land and it becoming desolate than I do about you having everything you want. He said, I care that if I give you something and you don't take care of it. And then now you want to thank me for it and tell everybody God gave it to you, but yet it's such a hassle to you that your heart ain't with it like it should be. So now I blessed you with this nice car, but you refuse to get it washed because it costs too much. So you ride around riding dirty, literally, but you keep telling everybody you're believing for more. You won't keep the apartment clean that you live in. But you're telling everybody God's going to give me a mansion. You won't run the business you had properly. Because every time something goes wrong, you flinch. But then you say, I'm going to be a millionaire. And God said, I'm not giving it to you all at once. I'm going to advance you little by little because I care if things don't go well. I care if the front of your house looks a mess. I care that the inside of your house is well taken care of. I care how your car looks. All the stuff I gave you, I'm going to give it to you little by little until you are able to possess it. That you're able to take care of it. That I'll give you more and more. And so many people they think that more and more is a week. The more and more is dependent upon your revelation. And I can't take you beyond your revelation. Or I can't take you beyond what you can see. Look at Deuteronomy 11:24, Amplified, Classic. Look what it says. Every place upon which the sole of your foot shall be, from the wilderness to Lebanon, and from the river Euphrates, to the western sea, the Mediterranean, your territory. He said, everywhere you put the sole of your foot on, your feet will never take you where your mind has never gone. And just because your feet touched it doesn't mean you own it. He said, once your feet touch it, then I'll let you possess it. You want it to come to you. He said, you're going to go to it. Notice, for your soul to touch it, you don't own it until you touch it, which means you had to move by faith. Man, I wish somebody would get what I'm saying. He doesn't give it to you and then you own it. There are things you have to do. And he said, I'm only going to give it to you little by little because I need you to handle it. I need you to get unmoved by it. There was a time when we used to, years ago, we would watch something and we'd go, man, that's a big house. I wonder what their electric bill is. I could care less now. See, people do stuff like that. Oh, that's a nice car. What's the gas mileage? Who cares? Does it look good? Does it go vroom vroom? Does it move fast? That's all I want to know. Can I smoke you off the front line? To the officers in the back, I'm kidding. I'm not. Catch me if you can, like the gingerbread man. So, listen. You understand that if you can't get a vision for it, if you can't get beyond flinching, every time you see something, you're like, oh my God, what does that cost? You're flinching. You're telegraphing that the increase concerns you and scares you. And so now God's like, well, we're just going to take you one step at a time until you can handle this. Then I'll give you more. Then you can handle that, and I'll give you more. Then you can handle this, and I'll give you more. And the problem is that people want the more, but they don't want to go through the growth. And the problem is if God gave you the more, he would waste it. Because then the beasts of the field get it. And when the beasts of the field get it, who gets glory for that? Who gets glory for what you can't handle? So why would that work for him? He's got to grow you to grow it. I'm amazed at how many people think there's magic in business. Do you think it's like some special magic? No, there isn't. It's you. If you want to succeed, you have to succeed, your business will succeed. If you fail as a person, your business will fail. Your ministry will fail. Your life will fail. Your marriage will fail. It's all tied on you. And when you have a bigger revelation of what God is trying to do, look at Genesis 13, verse 17. This is a good place to leave you on the hill. Put in the Amplified. And then put it in the ERV, easy to read. Arise, walk thou through the land, the length of it and the breadth of it. In other words, he said, walk through the entirety of the land. He says, for I will give it to you. You know why you got to walk through it? Look what he says. So go, walk through your land. I now give it to you. What if you didn't go walking? Anybody that tells you a nice car is not necessary has never ridden one. Anyone that tells you a nice house is not necessary has never walked through one. And he didn't say, listen to me, he didn't say walk through it as a renter. He said walk through it as an owner. Can I take you one more place? Luke 15, verse 17. How many of you know the parable or the story of the prodigal son? Right? Okay. He says, and when he came to himself, he said, what? I can't get into all this, but I will next week. But I want you to see something. I'm going to mess you up and leave you on the hill. He is a prodigal. So but his first thought was about servants. He has no discussion about sons. He asked for his inheritance, right? He asked for his inheritance. His father split it between him and his brother. Him and his brother are both sons. He goes off and he runs into financial ruin because he has too much too fast. And then he went into a world he wasn't supposed to be in. Which I can't tell you how many people take what they get from God and then try to go play in a world with it. And they get their butts handed to them and they come crawling back. But they don't come back acting like they come back thinking like his revelation of who he is was not ownership. Even though he asked. He asked for ownership. But when ownership is what you asked for, but your revelation is a servant, then you would rather rent than own. And then you want more, but you don't understand you're not acting like an owner. You're acting like a servant.
Thank you for listening to today's message. I hope you'll subscribe so you can receive the latest podcast to keep encouraged and inspired all through the week. Help us to continue to share the message of hope with those all around the world. Visit scc.church or click the link in the description to partner with us today. We hope you share this message with a friend and be sure to follow us on social media. We're praying for you. I know God's best is still ahead. We will see you next time.